The alarm blared through the corridors of Orbital Station Unity, like a metallic scream of agony. Commander Sarah Chen barely had time to adjust the universal translator before the transmission from the Galactic Council flooded every available frequency. In the command center, dozens of holographic screens displayed the same 12 imposing figures, representatives of the galaxy's oldest species. Their forms range from vaguely humanoid to completely incomprehensible. What they all shared was an expression Sarah had learned to recognize over the past few months: absolute disdain. High Counselor Vrathkar, a crystalline being whose voice resonated like broken bells, began Zizaki proclamation. His translation reached Sarah's ears: cold and mechanical, primitive species of Earth. For stellar cycles, the Council has observed your development with the characteristic patience of truly advanced civilizations. We tolerated your clumsy expansion beyond your home system. We ignored your childish attempts at diplomacy. But patience has limits, even for the immortal. Sarah kept her face neutral, but her fingers tightened around the edge of the command table. Beside her, Ambassador Marcus Webb remained equally impassive, decades of diplomatic training suppressing any visible reaction. Your chemical rockets pollute transit routes. Your rudimentary orbital stations pose navigation hazards. Your radio transmissions flood the electromagnetic spectrum with primitive cacophony. You are, in every measurable aspect, a Category Zeta civilization. Childish, dangerous in your ignorance. Counselor Talara, a gaseous entity contained within a biomechanical exoskeleton, continued where Vrathkar paused. Her voice was like wind through ancient caves. The Council of 12 Elders has deliberated. The decision is unanimous and irrevocable. Humanity has 30 Earth rotations to present unconditional surrender. Your propulsion systems will be dismantled. Your colonies outside the home system will be evacuated. Earth will be placed under galactic protectorate until your species demonstrates sufficient maturity for civilized interstellar society. Sarah felt the blood freeze in her veins, but forced herself to breathe calmly. This was the moment they had all prepared for, the moment human leadership had secretly anticipated for decades. The alternative to surrender, Talara continued with chilling indifference, is the complete sterilization of your presence beyond the terrestrial atmosphere. Your orbital facilities will be vaporized. Your ships will be disintegrated. Your satellites will be reduced to subatomic particles. Humanity will remain confined to the home planet for 1,000 generations until you relearn humility. Counselor Jacri, whose appearance resembled a praying mantis, enlarged to terrifying proportions, inclined his head with an almost gentle gesture. Do not interpret this as cruelty. It is protection. Protection from yourselves and protection of the galactic order we have maintained for eons. Young civilizations often self-destruct upon reaching the void too quickly. Consider our intervention a mercy. The transmission was abruptly cut. The silence that followed in the command center was heavier than any artificial gravity. Sarah finally allowed herself to release the breath she had been holding. Around her, officers and technicians remained paralyzed, processing the magnitude of what had just happened. 30 days. An ultimatum that reduced centuries of human progress to dust. Ambassador Webb was the first to move, discreetly touching a device on his wrist. The doors of the command center sealed with a pneumatic hiss. Electromagnetic interference fields activated around the room, completely isolating it from any external surveillance. When he finally spoke, his voice carried something Sarah had never heard before, a dangerous smile. They took the bait. Sarah blinked, momentary confusion crossing her features. "Sir?" Webb turned to the crew, and his posture shifted completely. The stooped, conciliatory diplomat vanished, replaced by something sharp and predatory. "Attention to all present. Authorization. Code Delta Omega 7. Initiate Protocol Leviathan." The words were familiar to Sarah only as whispered rumors in off-hours corridors. Urban legends among veteran pilots, stories no one confirmed, but everyone secretly hoped were true. One of the holographic screens flickered, displaying encrypted data Sarah didn't recognize. Commander Li Jiao, the station's senior communications officer, entered a sequence of codes with slightly trembling hands. "Message transmitted on ultra-secure channel, sir. All facilities responding." Webb nodded and approached Sarah, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Commander Chen, you have served with distinction in the public space program for 12 years. Your record is impeccable. Your loyalty unquestionable. And now you need to know the truth that only 73 people on Earth fully know." He gestured, and another holographic screen materialized, displaying a three-dimensional map of the solar system. But it wasn't a map Sarah recognized. There were facilities marked in locations where officially nothing existed. Moons of Jupiter, asteroids in the belt, even the far side of the Earth's moon. For the past 42 years, Sarah humanity has operated two parallel space programs. The public one, which you know was designed as camouflage, inefficient chemical rockets, rudimentary orbital stations, deliberately obsolete technology for galactic consumption. He zoomed in on one of the markings, revealing a colossal structure hidden inside a hollowed-out asteroid. The second program, Project Prometheus, developed technologies that would make our species not just competitive, but genuinely threatening to the established order. Gravitational manipulation, warp drive, temporal stasis fields, weaponry that converts asteroids into relativistic projectiles. Sarah felt the floor disappear beneath her feet. The implications were too vast to fully process. Why? Why hide this? Why make us look weak? Webb smiled with genuine sadness. Because civilizations that look threatening are destroyed preemptively, Commander. The Council does not tolerate competition. Emerging species with real potential are eliminated before they can challenge hegemony. In the last 3,000 years, 17 promising civilizations simply disappeared after demonstrating technological advances too quickly. He returned his attention to the holographic map. We learned from their mistakes. We presented a facade of calculated incompetence while building military infrastructure in every celestial body that could be hollowed out. We infiltrated agents into all 12 Council civilizations. We mapped their psychological, biological, and technological weaknesses. And we waited for the inevitable moment when their arrogance would lead them to fatally underestimate us. Sarah looked around the command center, seeing her colleagues with new eyes. How many of them knew? How many were part of Project Prometheus from the beginning? And now, Webb said, with a dangerously calm voice, we demonstrate that human courtesy is a choice, not a necessity. That our diplomacy is preference, not weakness. And that underestimating predators who evolved hunting megafauna with stone tools is a catastrophic strategic error. He touched another control, and dozens of video feeds flooded the screens. Ships emerging from hidden hangars, weapons activating on platforms that looked like simple mining satellites, force fields enveloping entire colonies. The Council gave us 30 days, Sarah, but in 72 hours they will understand that they have made the most fundamental mistake any civilization can make. He paused, letting the weight of the words fill the silence. They woke up something that should have remained dormant. Sarah swallowed hard, feeling for the first time in her career the full weight of what it meant to be human. Not a primitive species blindly stumbling through the cosmos, but something infinitely more dangerous. A predator that had learned to hide its claws until the perfect moment to unsheath them. The screens around them continued to display increasing activity. In lunar orbit, apparent debris from old satellites began to reorganize, revealing hidden weaponry. In the asteroid belt, seemingly inert space rocks activated engines that defied conventional physics. And somewhere beyond Neptune's orbit, in a facility that officially did not exist, the greatest weapon ever conceived by human ingenuity began its warm-up cycle. The Council expected surrender or destruction. They would receive a lesson in humility that their millennia-old civilizations would never forget. 72 hours after the ultimatum, Sarah Chen floated inside a facility that officially did not exist. Prometheus Alpha Base, carved into the heart of the asteroid palace, was larger than any city she had ever visited on Earth. Corridors illuminated by artificial light snaked through miles of space rock, revealing hangars capable of housing entire fleets. Automated factories produced components whose purpose Sarah was only beginning to comprehend. And at the center of it all, a war room where the true human leadership coordinated decades of preparation. General Victoria Ramos, Supreme Commander of Project Prometheus, was a woman Sarah recognized only from historical records. Officially, Ramos had retired from military service 15 years ago. In reality, she had merely disappeared to oversee the construction of the largest secret project in human history. "Welcome to the heart of the resistance, Commander Chen," Ramos said, extending her hand in perfectly calibrated artificial gravity. "I regret that the circumstances of your initiation were so abrupt." Sarah shook the offered hand, still processing the magnitude of what she was witnessing. Around them, three-dimensional holograms displayed real-time resource positioning across the entire solar system. How many bases like this exist? 17 primary facilities, Ramos replied, walking to the central command table. 63 secondary ones, 241 camouflaged weapon platforms, and approximately 1,800 human assets operating beyond the knowledge of public programs. She touched a sequence of controls, and the hologram expanded, revealing details that would make any military strategist salivate with envy. Each facility was built using technology mined from alien artifacts that the Council believes we have yet to discover. Ironic, considering our first archaeological discovery occurred on Mars 53 years ago. Sarah vaguely remembered reports of anomalies found during Martian exploration missions, unusual rock formations that public geologists had attributed to natural processes, the monoliths of Olympus Mons. Ramos nodded in approval. Remnants of a civilization the Council erased approximately 80,000 years ago. They made the mistake of developing quantum weaponry too quickly. They were sterilized preemptively, but they left data libraries buried so deeply that even the Council didn't find them. She zoomed in on a section of the hologram showing schematics of incomprehensible technology. We spent 5 decades translating and adapting knowledge that previous civilizations paid with extinction to develop. Gravitational manipulators that turn mass into a weapon. Propulsion systems that warp space itself. And our most ambitious project? The hologram shifted, displaying something that made Sarah momentarily lose the ability to breathe. A structure orbiting beyond Neptune so vast it could be mistaken for a small moon. Project Ragnarok, Ramos said with a solemn voice, a particle accelerator the size of Manhattan, capable of generating proton beams with enough energy to vaporize entire moons. It takes 16 hours to fully charge, but once activated, it can eliminate targets at interstellar distances. That is, Sarah hesitated, searching for the correct word, unsettling. It's terrifying, Ramos corrected with brutal frankness. And that's exactly why it will never be fired unless absolutely necessary. Our goal is not massacre. It is persuasion through demonstration of capability. She deactivated the Ragnarok hologram and turned her attention fully to Sarah. You are wondering why you were brought here. Why reveal all this to a station commander who, until 3 days ago, believed our species could barely maintain stable orbit? Sarah nodded mutely. Because you represent exactly what we need the Council to see over the next 27 days. Genuine shock, authentic confusion, real despair. You will be our ambassador in the final negotiations, and every emotion you demonstrate will be completely true. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. You're going to use me as emotional bait? Ramos smiled without humor. We are going to use all of humanity as emotional bait, Commander. The Council expects panic, capitulation, pleas for mercy, and we will give them exactly that, while our true forces position themselves like pieces on a 3-dimensional chessboard. She gestured, and a new officer entered the room, Admiral James Kovacs, whose face Sarah recognized from public broadcasts, where he had advocated for cuts in the space budget. Another farce. Kovacs, update Commander Chen on the current positioning. The Admiral activated a new set of holograms showing the solar system to precise scale. In the last 72 hours, 17 Council fleets have entered solar system space. They are taking strategic positions around Earth, Mars, and the main asteroid belts. Classic siege pattern. He zoomed in on the region around Earth. What they don't know is that every seemingly inoperable satellite in Earth orbit is actually a weapon platform in dormant mode. When activated, they can generate interdiction fields that block any attempt at orbital bombardment. And their fleets? Sarah asked. Kovacs smiled with predatory satisfaction. Constantly monitored by our Phantom sensor network, we have complete mapping of their energy signatures, communication patterns, and even their crew's rest cycles. We know when each ship changes shifts, when they refuel, when their commanders sleep. He touched another control, and biological profiles appeared next to each ship. And thanks to our infiltrated agents over the last 4 decades, we know the psychological weaknesses of every species represented. The Vrathkar are extremely territorial and panic when surrounded. The Talara rely on collective mind coordination that can be disrupted with specific electromagnetic interference. The Jakri have an instinctive fear of predators that attack alone. Sarah began to grasp the depth of the planning involved. You're going to attack them psychologically. Ramos took the floor again. We will demonstrate that we are not the primitive civilization they believe. We will start with subtlety. Small glitches in their systems that cannot be explained, intercepted communications that shouldn't be possible, resource movement that their sensors don't detect. She paused, letting the implications sink in. And then, when they are questioning their own perceptions, we will reveal the first layer of our true capabilities. Not all at once. That would be wasting leverage, but enough to turn arrogant certainty into prudent doubt. What if they decide to attack immediately? Kovacs replied with absolute confidence. They won't. Millennia-old civilizations don't survive by being impulsive. They will investigate, they will analyze, they will deliberate. And every minute they spend doing that gives us more time to position our final pieces. Ramos approached Sarah, placing both hands on her shoulders. In the coming weeks, Commander, you will see the best and the worst of humanity. Our capacity for long-term planning that no other species has demonstrated. Our willingness for sacrifice that immortal civilizations have forgotten. And our absolute refusal to accept that there is anything in the universe we cannot eventually comprehend and overcome. She released Sarah and turned back to the solar system hologram. The Council believes the youth of our civilization is a weakness. They will learn that it is our greatest strength, because we do not carry the weight of millions of years of precedent. We are not bound by ancient protocols. We can adapt, improvise, and innovate in ways that minds crystallized by time can no longer conceive. Sarah looked around the war room, seeing human officers coordinating operations with efficiency that rivaled anything she had imagined possible. And then, after we demonstrate our capabilities, what happens when the Council realizes they were deceived? Ramos met Sarah's eyes with fierce intensity. Then, Commander, Chen, we negotiate, not as supplicants begging for mercy, but as equals demanding respect. And if they refuse to grant us that, through reason, we will demonstrate through action that terrestrial predators were never conquered, only temporarily contained. The holograms around them pulsed with constant activity, ships moving, weapons activating, agents reporting, the entire infrastructure of a civilization that had spent decades preparing for a singular moment. The moment humanity would cease to be seen as prey and would reveal itself as something infinitely more dangerous. Day 7 of the ultimatum. Aboard the Council flagship, the Eternal Guardian, High Counselor, Vrathkar, reviewed reports of anomalies with increasing irritation. His crystalline form refracted the command room light in hypnotic patterns as he processed incomprehensible data. Over the past 3 days, small irregularities began to accumulate in the siege fleet's systems. Nothing catastrophic, just annoying enough to demand investigation. Long-range communications showed nanosecond delays that shouldn't exist. Gravitational sensors detected fluctuations that disappeared before being confirmed. And navigation systems occasionally registered objects on impossible trajectories. Commander Tessara, summon the other counselors, Vrathkar ordered with crystalline resonance. We need to discuss these anomalies. The gaseous counselor materialized in her exoskeleton form, her sensors already processing the same data. Do you believe the humans are responsible? Sarah questioned with audible skepticism. Their technical capabilities barely exceed controlled combustion propulsion. Vrathkar did not answer immediately. Civilizations do not survive 80,000 years ignoring patterns, even subtle ones. Summon the counselors. While the meeting was being organized, 1,000 miles away, in a seemingly abandoned orbital station, Lieutenant Maria Santos monitored every word through surveillance equipment that technically shouldn't exist. She smiled to herself, touching the communicator embedded in her wrist. Prometheus Alpha. This is Listening Post 7. They took the bait. They are calling an emergency session. Admiral Kovac's voice responded with evident satisfaction. Excellent work, Santos. Maintain constant monitoring. Phase 2 begins in 6 hours. Maria adjusted the sensors, capturing every frequency the Eternal Guardian emitted. Decades of infiltration had provided complete blueprints of all Council ship classes, every weak point, every systemic dependency, every security protocol. And now, methodically, humanity began to exploit that knowledge. In the Council deliberation chamber, holograms of the 12 representatives manifested. Some species participated physically. Others projected consciousness across light years. But all shared expressions of growing confusion. Councillor Jacri, his giant mantis form clicking with agitation, was the first to vocalize concerns. My fleets report interference in targeting systems. Nothing that compromises functionality, but enough to require constant recalibrations. This is not accidental. Councillor Mithra, an aquatic entity in a containment tank, rippled with irritation. My biological sensors detect inconsistent chemical signatures in the vacuum around human positions. Traces of propellant that do not match their known technologies. One by one, each councillor reported similar anomalies. Small, inexplicable, and worryingly cumulative. Vrathkar let the silence stretch before speaking. Either we are witnessing simultaneous system degradation across 17 independent fleets, something statistically impossible, or the humans possess capabilities they have not previously demonstrated. Councillor Dirax, an artificial intelligence in a mechanical body, processed probabilities with computational speed. Hypothesis 2 has a probability of 87.3%. I recommend invasive investigation of human facilities. Tsara projected hesitation through frequency modulations. Investigation before the agreed deadline would violate diplomatic protocols. This would set a dangerous precedent. Vrathkar considered this. Precedent was everything to ancient civilizations. Every action became part of records analyzed for millennia. Then we will observe more closely. Increase passive monitoring. If the humans are attempting intimidation through technological tricks, the futility will become evident. Decision made, the holograms began to dissipate. But Vrathkar remained, crystals pulsing with something a human mind would recognize as unease. At Prometheus Alpha, General Ramos watched the council meeting through intercepted feeds with calculated satisfaction. They are exactly where we need them to be, confused but not alarmed, investigating but not acting. Sarah, are you prepared for the next phase? Sarah Chen, now fully integrated into the initiative, nodded firmly. Public Ambassador ready for plea transmission at the 27-minute mark. Ramos smiled without joy. Remember, every word must sound genuinely desperate. You are begging for reconsideration, offering concessions, demonstrating exactly the weakness they expect. And while you do that, Kovac replied, entering the room, our phantom units will complete positioning around every council flagship. When they are ready to respond negatively to your plea, we will have high-resolution sensors mapping every inch of their infrastructures. He activated a hologram showing small objects moving through the solar system on calculated trajectories. Drones the size of baseballs, invisible to conventional sensors, propelled by gravitational manipulators that leave no thermal signature, each carrying enough processing power to analyze molecular structures. Sarah studied the trajectories with reluctant admiration. "How many are we deploying?" 12,800, Kovac replied casually. "One for every critical section of every council ship. When we are done, we will know their fleets better than their own engineers." Ramos checked synchronized timers. "Sarah, you transmit in 15 minutes. Kovac, ensure all drones are in position before the Council's response. And someone confirm that our infiltrated agents are ready for Phase 3. A young officer, whom Sarah didn't recognize, responded. "Agent Yuki Tanaka reports readiness on Vrathkar Prime. Agent Hassan al-Rahman confirms access to Talara diplomatic protocols. All 17 deep agents are awaiting activation." Sarah felt the overwhelming weight of the operation, not just military, but infiltration on a scale that had taken generations to establish. How many people dedicated their entire lives to this? Ramos met her eyes with solemn respect. 143 agents never returned to Earth. They lived entire lives in alien societies, had families with non-human species, died far from home, all so that this moment would be possible. She paused, letting the magnitude of the sacrifice sink in. "We cannot waste what they gave us." Sarah nodded, feeling responsibility settle on her shoulders like a physical cloak. She walked to the transmission chamber, mentally preparing for the role she had to play, the desperate plea of a civilization on the brink of annihilation. Except that this time, the desperation was a trap, and the annihilation a possibility that worked in both directions. The red transmission light activated. Sarah took a deep breath and let genuine vulnerability penetrate her voice. "Honored Council of 12 Elders, on behalf of humanity, I come to plead for reconsideration of your ultimatum. We understand that we appear primitive in your eyes, that our technologies are rudimentary, that our presence causes inconvenience." She paused, letting genuine tears form, not from fear, but from carefully transmuted anger. "But we are a young species, still learning to walk among the stars. We ask for patience, guidance, the opportunity to prove that we can mature and contribute to the galactic community." The words were poisoned honey, every syllable calculated to reinforce perceptions of weakness, while human senses mapped every reaction in the enemy fleets. And as Sarah spoke, 12,800 drones reached final positions, invisible and deadly, around the most powerful ships the galaxy had ever built. The first wave was complete, and the Council still didn't realize that the hunt had already begun. Day 15. The Council's millennia-old patience was beginning to crack. Vrathkar observed holograms of his own security systems with something emotional species would call controlled panic. Over the past 8 days, the anomalies had not only persisted, they had escalated. His navigation databases now contained routes no one had programmed. Communication systems transmitted on frequencies they theoretically couldn't access. And more disturbingly, internal sensors occasionally detected presences that disappeared before being located. The Council's emergency meeting was taking place for the 5th time in 2 weeks. A record in an institution that usually deliberated for months. "This is not acceptable," declared Councillor Jacqui, his voice an irritated clicking of chitinous mandibles. My technical teams have found codes in our systems that they do not recognize. Codes that should not be possible given known human technology. Mithra rippled in his tank with aquatic agitation. My biologists analyzed the chemical traces, antimatter propellants, gravitational signatures of spatial manipulation, evidence of technologies that Category Zeta civilizations should not possess. Dirac processed data with increasing speed. I executed simulations of 472 possible scenarios. In 389 of them, we are observing a civilization significantly more advanced than it appears. In 83 scenarios, we have been deliberately deceived for decades. Tasara projected something close to fear. Are you suggesting that humans deceived us for generations while building secret military infrastructure? I am not suggesting, Dirac replied, with computational certainty. I am declaring it as a possibility with 87.3% probability. Heavy silence filled the deliberation chamber. Civilizations that deceive demonstrate strategic intelligence. And strategic intelligence in a young species was an existential threat. Vrathkar finally resonated with crystalline decision. We send an investigative probe to the nearest human facility. Not an attack, just invasive observation. If the humans protest, it is an admission of something to hide. The decision was implemented immediately. An unmanned probe, the size of a terrestrial vehicle, was launched toward orbital station Unity with a clear instruction: map everything. At Prometheus Alpha, silent alarms activated as soon as the probe began its trajectory. They took the bait again, Kovac announced with predatory satisfaction. Investigative probe approaching Unity. ETA 42 minutes. Ramos studied tactical options. Sarah, are you at Unity? Sarah's voice responded through a secure communicator. Affirmative. Team is prepared for reception. How do we proceed? Let the probe approach, Ramos instructed. Let them scan whatever they want. Unity is a public facility. Nothing there compromises operational security. But while they scan our facade, activate protocol mirror. Protocol mirror activating, Sarah confirmed. 42 minutes later, the Council probe reached Unity's perimeter and began invasive scans. Every inch of the station was mapped. Every energy signature recorded, every communication frequency intercepted, exactly as humanity had planned. Because while the probe scanned Unity, human drones simultaneously scanned the probe, and through the probe, the communication protocols that connected back to the Eternal Guardian. In less than 5 minutes, Project Prometheus had complete access to the Council flagship's security systems. Kovac watched data flow across screens with almost reverent admiration. Unbelievable. They literally gave us the keys to the castle. We now have complete topology of their command networks. Ramos allowed herself a rare smile. Arrogance is a weapon that works equally against everyone. They assumed investigating primitives carries no risk. We will teach them differently. She activated a system-wide communicator. All units, Phase 3 is active. Initiate calculated demonstrations. Across the solar system, simultaneous events began to unfold. Asteroids that had floated inert for decades suddenly activated engines, moving into formations that defied conventional physics, not threateningly toward the Council fleets, but demonstrably enough for everyone to notice. Seemingly dead satellites around Earth began emitting energy signatures consistent with antimatter weaponry. And more disturbingly for the Council, communications began to be intercepted and retransmitted back to them with minor modifications. Not malicious alterations, just enough to demonstrate that privacy was an illusion. Aboard the Eternal Guardian, controlled chaos took over. All stations report status, Vrathkar ordered with a resonance bordering on crystalline hysteria. Commander Tessara processed feeds with growing horror. Sensors detect activation of gravitational propulsion in 147 objects previously classified as space debris. Energy signatures consistent with Category Beta technology or higher. Jakri clicked mandibles with something that could be called panic. My tactical communications were intercepted, decrypted, and retransmitted with an attached message. A message in our own language that simply says, "We hear you." Emithra emitted bubbles of agitation. Long-range scans detect massive structures in trans-Neptunian orbit, structures that did not exist in previous sweeps, or were camouflaged beyond our detection capability. Drax processed implications with computational speed that generated overheating in his cores. Complete reassessment necessary. Humans are not Category Zeta. They demonstrate minimum Category Gamma capabilities. Possibly Beta. Probability of deliberate deception is now 96.7%. The silence that followed was absolute. Category Gamma meant a civilization capable of manipulating fundamental physics. Beta meant a threat to the galactic order itself. Vrathkar forced himself to process rationally. Options? Tessara replied with hesitation that gaseous species rarely demonstrated. Preemptive attack before they reveal full capabilities. Or immediate negotiation, recognizing them as equals. Jakri clicked vehemently. Attacking now guarantees a conflict we may not win. Especially if they hid capabilities for decades while studying our weaknesses. Mithra rippled with reluctant agreement. I recommend direct communication, not through public diplomatic channels, but a private transmission acknowledging that we understand the shift in the power dynamic. Dirac calculated probabilities. Agreement favors survival in 82% of projected scenarios. Conflict favors survival in only 37%. Vrathkar crystallized the decision with a resonance that echoed throughout the ship. Transmit a request for private dialogue with the true human leadership, not with the public ambassador, with those who orchestrated this deception. At Prometheus Alpha, Ramos received the message with carefully suppressed triumph. Sarah, they asked to speak with the true command. You continue as the public face demonstrating despair. But now I will personally conduct parallel negotiations. Kovac, how much of our true capabilities have we revealed so far? Approximately 17%, Kovac estimated, enough to establish that we are a credible threat. Insufficient to show the full extent of our arsenal. Perfect, Ramos said with satisfaction. We maintain leverage while demonstrating a willingness for dialogue. But we make it clear that dialogue is a choice, not a necessity. She activated a response transmission to the Council. Honored Council, your request for private communication has been received. We agree to dialogue. But let it be clear that our preference for peace is not an admission of incapacity for war. It is a conscious choice by predators who understand the cost of violence. She paused, letting the words settle. We prepared defenses because history taught us that unprotected civilizations are extinct civilizations. We hid capabilities because species that look threatening are eliminated preemptively. And we developed technologies in secret because open innovation invites appropriation or destruction. Another calculated pause. We are willing to discuss a new paradigm where humanity is recognized as an equal. But if the Council insists on treating us as primitives, they will discover that underestimating terrestrial predators is a fatal mistake that previous species made millions of years ago. Transmission ended. Ramos allowed herself to marginally relax. And now we wait. They will deliberate. They will debate. And every hour they spend doing that gives us more time to prepare the final revelation. Sarah watched from Unity through secure feeds. What if they decide to attack anyway? Ramos smiled with absolute confidence. Then they learn why predators who hunted mammoths with spears fear nothing the universe can present. The holograms around them showed real-time positioning. Humans and aliens. Predators and prey. But for the first time in millennia, it was unclear which side was which. Day 22. The negotiation room existed only in virtual reality, a neutral space where representatives from both sides could meet without physical risk. But the tension was absolutely real. General Ramos materialized her holographic projection before the 12 council members. She chose to appear in full military uniform, not diplomatic robes. The message was clear. This was not a plea. It was negotiation between equivalent forces. Vrathkar resonated first, his crystalline form projecting light patterns that indicated extreme caution. General Victoria Ramos, your records indicate retirement 15 years ago, but we now understand that human public records are tools of disinformation. Ramos nodded without hesitation. Correct. Just as we assume your demonstrations of force are tools of intimidation, we both operate through carefully constructed layers of perception. The difference is that we now mutually recognize this. Tasara rippled in her exoskeleton with gaseous hesitation. You acknowledge that you deliberately deceived the Council for decades? Ramos met the equivalent of the Councilor's eyes without blinking. I acknowledge that we survived using strategic intelligence that millennia-old civilizations have apparently forgotten. You operate under the premise that youth equals inferiority. We operate under the premise that any species that reaches space without being annihilated deserves respect until proven otherwise. Jakri clicked with irritation. You speak of respect while infiltrating agents into our societies, while mapping our weaknesses? This is a betrayal of diplomatic trust. Ramos allowed herself a cold smile. Diplomatic trust? You gave us an ultimatum of surrender or annihilation. You surrounded our solar system with war fleets. And you speak of betrayal? She activated a hologram showing timelines. 53 years ago, we discovered evidence on Mars of a civilization you sterilized. 42 years ago, we initiated Project Prometheus because we understood that emerging species face a binary choice: hide capabilities or face preemptive destruction. Diracs processed information with mechanical efficiency. You confirm possession of technologies significantly beyond what you publicly demonstrated. Ramos gestured, and a new set of holograms materialized. Weapon schematics, propulsion diagrams, specifications of systems that would make Category Beta civilizations pause. I confirm. Gravitational manipulators capable of turning asteroids into relativistic projectiles. Propulsion systems that locally warp space-time. Quantum weaponry that ignores conventional shielding. And our centerpiece, she zoomed in on the image of Project Ragnarok. a trans-Neptunian particle accelerator capable of firing beams with enough energy to vaporize moons at interstellar distances. Currently charged to 63% of maximum capacity. Absolute silence filled the virtual space. Even for millennia-old counselors, the implications were terrifying. Mithra eventually rippled with something close to reluctant respect. Why reveal this? Why not keep it secret until absolutely necessary? Because strategic transparency is the foundation of sustainable peace, Ramos replied with calculated sincerity. You need to understand that attacking humanity does not result in a clean victory. It results in a conflict that will devastate both sides. Mutually assured destruction, as we call it. Hrothgar processed the concept with thoughtful resonance. You threaten mutual destruction. I guarantee mutual destruction, Ramos corrected. Not as a threat, as a fact. If forced into total conflict, we do not fight to win. We fight to ensure that victory costs everything you value. Every ship, every station, every homeworld. She paused, letting the weight of the words settle. But we prefer not to reach that point. We prefer a structure where humanity is recognized as a peer, where we contribute to the galactic order instead of being suppressed by it. Tassara projected confusion. And if we refuse, if we decide that the threat of your existence outweighs the risks of conflict? Ramos touched a control and infiltration data appeared. Human faces living on alien worlds. Agents in positions of influence that took generations to establish. Then you will discover that war with humanity is not just military conflict. It is economic destabilization. It is cultural sabotage. It is every system you think you control, revealing vulnerabilities you ignored for millennia. Jacri rose with open mandibles. You threaten terrorism if we do not yield to demands. I do not threaten, Ramos clarified with lethal calm. I describe operational reality. We have 143 deep agents in your 12 civilizations, many with local families, positions of trust, access to critical infrastructures. They do not want violence. We do not want violence. But if forced, the capacity exists. Dirac calculated probabilities with speed that generated overheating. This is blackmail on an unprecedented scale. This is a guarantee that war benefits no one, Ramos replied. You can destroy us, but the cost will be measured in trillions of lives and centuries of reconstruction. Or you can accept us as the 13th civilization on the Council and benefit from our unique perspective. Mithra rippled with genuine curiosity. What unique perspective do humans offer? Ramos smiled with the first sign of genuine warmth. The perspective of a species that evolved hunting larger predators with improvised tools, that survived ice ages, pandemics, and near extinctions through cooperation and innovation. That reached space not because it was easy, but because it refuses to accept limitations. She gestured to the holograms around. You govern the galaxy through maintaining the status quo. We thrive through constant disruption. You value stability. We value progress. The combination of these philosophies creates a synthesis stronger than either alone. Hrothgar resonated with crystalline consideration. And if we agree to representation on the Council, will you dismantle secret military capabilities? Absolutely not. Ramos replied immediately, but we commit to transparency regarding future development. You will know our capabilities. We will know yours. balanced through mutual knowledge, not through forced ignorance. PULSAR projected hesitation. This requires deliberation. The Council does not make hasty decisions. Ramos checked the timer. You have 8 days until the original ultimatum deadline. We suggest you use that time wisely, because if the decision is war, humanity is prepared. But if the decision is peace, the possibilities are limitless. She prepared to disconnect, but Jikri interrupted. One final question: why choose to reveal capabilities now? Why not continue the mask of weakness? Ramos considered the answer carefully, because a genuine predator does not need to hide indefinitely, only until it is in a position where revealing its claws does not result in immediate destruction. We have reached that position. Now we choose to demonstrate that human courtesy is a conscious choice, not an imposed necessity. She disconnected before they could respond, leaving the Council to process the revelations. Back on Prometheus Alpha, General Ramos waited with a tense expression. How did it go? Exactly as planned, Ramos replied, shocked but not irrational, understanding the costs but still processing the implications. Now we wait and maintain pressure through subtle demonstrations. Sarah Chen watched through the feeds, still on Unity Station, maintaining the public facade. What if they decide we are too great a threat to tolerate? Ramos met her eyes through the communicator. Then we demonstrate that underestimating humans is the last mistake any civilization makes. But I believe they will choose survival, because that is what ancient species do. They survive through adaptation, not through suicidal pride. The surrounding holograms showed continuous activity, fleets repositioning, sensors mapping, both sides calculating advantages. But for the first time, those calculations included the possibility that humans were not pawns in the galactic game. They were players who had simply waited patiently for their turn to move pieces on the cosmic board. And when they moved, they changed the game entirely. Day 30. The deadline of the ultimatum had arrived. Sarah Chen was once again in the command center of Unity Station. But this time, there was no fear in her eyes, only iron determination as she watched the Council fleets maintain positions around the solar system. For 29 days, both sides had moved like pieces on a cosmic chessboard. Demonstrations of force, tense negotiations, calculated revelations, and now, in the final moment, the decision would be made. The Council transmission arrived simultaneously on all frequencies, but this time, the tone was radically different. Vrathkar materialized in a hologram, its crystalline form displaying patterns that Sarah had learned to recognize as reluctant respect, representatives of humanity. The Council of 12 Elders has deliberated extensively on the nature of your civilization. The conclusions reached are unsettling to the established order, but undeniable in their validity. It paused, as if the next words were physically difficult to utter. We recognize that we were victims of our own arrogance. We assumed that youth equates to inferiority, that visible technology represents total capability, that civilizations must progress along predictable paths. PULSAR materialized beside it, its gaseous form rippling with something akin to awe. Humanity has taught us that predators come in unexpected forms, that strategic intelligence surpasses brute force, that patience measured in decades can overcome wisdom measured in millennia. Counselor Mithra emerged from the holographic tank. You have demonstrated capabilities that we classify between beta and alpha category. You have infiltrated our societies with a depth that questions our very security. You have developed weaponry that threatens our homeworlds. Jacree clicked its mandibles with grudgingly given respect. And you did all this while maintaining the appearance of a primitive species stumbling through the cosmos. The sophistication of this deception alone qualifies you for recognition. Durax processed data with mechanical efficiency. Analysis indicates that conflict with humanity would result in a council victory with a probability of 62%. But costs would include the destruction of a minimum of 4 homeworlds, the loss of 70% of military fleets, and economic destabilization lasting approximately 300 standard years. A heavy silence filled the transmission as the implications were processed. Finally, Vrathkar resonated with crystalline decision. Therefore, the Council of 12 Elders becomes the Council of 13. Humanity is recognized as a peer civilization with full representation, not as a species under protectorate, not as a primitive culture being guided, but as equals who have earned their position through strategic merit. Sarah felt an overwhelming emotion surge through her chest. Decades of preparation, generations of sacrifice, all culminating in this singular moment. But Vrathkar was not finished. However, let it be clear that this recognition comes with expectations. You have demonstrated a capacity for sophisticated deception. This will not be tolerated in future relations between council members. Transparency is the foundation of collective trust. General Ramos materialized beside Sarah, taking control of the response. We agree completely. Transparency will be the guiding principle moving forward. But we understand that trust is built gradually, not declared instantly. We propose a transition period where both sides demonstrate good faith through coordinated actions. Tassara rippled with curiosity. What kind of coordinated actions? Ramos gestured, and new holograms materialized, showing human research data. Humanity has developed medical technologies that can benefit council species. Treatments for crystalline degradation in the Vrathkar. Gaseous stabilization therapies for the Talara. In exchange, access to galactic databases would accelerate our understanding of advanced physics. Mithra processed the offer with evident interest. An exchange of knowledge as the foundation of cooperation? Exactly, Ramos confirmed. We demonstrate mutual value instead of just mutual capacity for destruction. Jacree tilted its head thoughtfully. And what about your military arsenal? The weapons you developed in secret? Ramos did not hesitate. They will remain operational, just like the arsenals of every council member. But we agree to mutual inspections and notification of significant developments. Verification, not disarmament. Trust through transparency, not through forced vulnerability. Durax calculated the implications. The proposal is logically consistent with the maintenance of peace through a balance of power. Probability of long-term success, 74%. Vrathkar resonated with something that could be called relief. Then it is decided. Humanity takes its seat on the council immediately. Siege fleets will be withdrawn within 72 hours. Cooperation committees will be established within 30 days, and a new era of galactic collaboration begins. It paused, crystals pulsing with particular intensity. But let all understand the lesson learned here. Youth does not equate to weakness. Silence does not equate to ignorance, and courtesy does not equate to an inability for violence. Humanity taught us this in the most effective way possible. The transmission ended, leaving Sarah and Ramos in momentary silence. "We did it," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Generations of effort, decades of sacrifice. And we did it." Ramos placed a hand on her shoulder with deep respect. "We didn't just do it, Sarah. We fundamentally changed the galactic power dynamic. We demonstrated that terrestrial predators don't need to be stronger, just smarter, more patient, and more willing to do what is necessary for survival." Around them, the Unity Command Center erupted in contained celebration. Decades of tension released in a singular moment of triumph. But on Prometheus Alpha, General Ramos addressed all secret facilities simultaneously. "Attention to all members of the Prometheus Initiative. Phase 1 is complete. Recognition has been achieved, but our mission does not end here. Now begins the harder work, proving we deserve the seat we earned." She paused, letting the weight of the words settle. "Maintain vigilance. Continued technological development. Never forget that the current peace was won through preparation for war, and that maintaining peace requires the same dedication that achieved it." Admiral Kovac approached with a thoughtful expression. "What about the deep cover agents, the 143 who lived entire lives in alien societies?" Ramos considered this with reverence. "Offer them the opportunity to return if they wish, but many have built families there, lives that transcend the original missions. They chose a sacrifice that goes beyond any orders. We will honor that by respecting their decisions, whatever they may be." She looked at the holograms showing the solar system. Alien fleets beginning to withdraw, human facilities activating transition protocols from war to peace. Sarah, watching from Unity, received a private message from one of the deep cover agents, Yuki Tanaka, living on Vrathkar Prime for 32 years. "Commander Chen," the message read, "I have lived half my life among the crystallines. I married one. I have children who are impossible biological hybrids that science does not yet fully comprehend. My mission was infiltration. My life became integration. I will not return to Earth, but I will serve as a bridge between our civilizations." Sarah read the message with tears in her eyes, finally understanding the true cost of what had been achieved. Not just technology or strategy, but human beings who sacrificed identities, terrestrial families, and connections to home to ensure the survival of the species. She replied simply, "Your sacrifice honors all of humanity. Build bridges, create understanding, and know that you will never be forgotten." Weeks later, the first session of the Council of 13 officially convened. Sarah Chen, now Principal Ambassador of Humanity, took her seat alongside beings who weeks ago threatened to annihilate her species. Vrathkar opened the session with a resonance that echoed through the deliberation chamber. This session marks a new era in galactic history, an era where youth is recognized as strength, where diversity of perspective is valued over uniformity of thought, and where potential is measured not by civilizational age, but by demonstrated capability. It paused, crystals directing light towards Sarah. "Ambassador Chen, as the first act of your representation, what contribution does humanity offer the Council?" Sarah rose, feeling the weight of billions of expectations on her shoulders. "We offer the perspective of a species that learned that survival comes not from domination, but from adaptation. That true strength is not the capacity to destroy, but the wisdom not to need to. That sustainable peace is built not through forced submission, but through earned mutual respect. She activated a hologram showing Earth viewed from space. My homeworld is a planet that survived 5 mass extinctions. Our species almost vanished dozens of times, but each time, humans survived, not by being stronger than the threats, but by being more adaptable, more resilient, and more unwilling to accept extinction as inevitable. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes, senses, and equivalents of each representative. That is the philosophy we bring to the Council. Not the arrogance of youth, but the humility of a species that knows fragility and chooses strength despite it. Not the threat of destruction, but the promise that as long as one human is alive, hope remains. Silence filled the chamber. Then slowly, each council member offered a sign of respect in their own cultural manner. And Sarah knew in that moment that humanity had not just survived, it had thrived. And the universe would never be the same. End of story. If humanity's tenacity and its refusal to accept imposed limitations inspired you, imagine how many other stories of cosmic resilience await. On the frontiers of science fiction, the Prometheus Initiative may have ended, but the human journey among the stars has just begun. Subscribe to the channel for more chronicles from the galactic frontier, where terrestrial predators continue to demonstrate that underestimating our species is the last mistake any civilization makes. Because in the vast cosmos, where ancient civilizations measure time in eons, humanity proved something fundamental. It's not how long you've existed that matters, but what you do with the time you have. And we, humans, chose to make history.